Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a truly incredible Spring Cup team featuring the best Pokemon in this meta, Seaking. With Peck, Legacy Icy Wind, and Legacy Drill Run, Seaking has coverage for basically any Mon you can encounter in this meta. I put it on the lead, with Amoonguss and Tinkaton in the back, and it proved to be an incredibly strong team. I recommended the team to several of my factions teammates, and one of them, Sceptile, climbed from 2600 all the way to Legend in only 7 sets, a gain of over 400 ELO. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and in game number 1, we pick up a pretty nice lead, Seaking into Klefki. Even though Peck is resisted here, Seaking will always be able to land a Drill Run in this matchup. Now, Drill Run doesn't quite take the one-hit knockout, but it will put some pretty sizable damage onto the Klefki. Klefki ends up no-shielding. I go for a catch and sneak and send in Tinkaton. Tinkaton's going to be resisting whatever my opponent throws here. They went for a play rough, and now they reveal they have a Gourgeist. This matchup is honestly not super bad for Tinkaton. Tinkaton is able to threaten devastating damage with Gigaton Hammer, so Tinkaton is very good at pressuring shields away from opponents. My opponent can probably get away with just going for a Seed Bomb here, and they're going to do just that. The Incinerate's added up where Seed Bomb will take the KO. Now I'm going to look to bring in the Seaking. However, I don't have enough energy to outpace them. So I bring in the Seaking, throw 2 Pecks, and then get the catch and sneak of the Seed Bomb onto Amoonguss. This is a double resisted catch. Amoonguss more than happy to absorb that damage, and in the back, my opponent has their own Tinkaton. Tinkaton is a very strong Pokemon for this meta. I end up no-shielding as my opponent goes for the Gigaton Hammer, safe in the knowledge that even though Gigaton does a ton of damage, I will be able to survive it. I'm able to land a Grass Knot, which is very helpful, and I'm able to make Grass Knot number 2. While this damage is entirely resisted, this plus the Astonishes is adding up quite a bit on the Tinkaton. Tinkaton throws 2 in the move, but I'm going to shield, so that way my Astonish is going to register. Bulldoze will be shielded. I get the farm down, denying that energy, and in comes the Gourgeist. My opponent tries for the catch, but they do not get the Peekaboo. We're too patient. Back in comes the Gourgeist. I throw 1 Astonish, go for the foul play. They put up the shield, but I'm only 2 Pecks away from the Icy Wind. Seaking's coverage is just simply too good. Icy Wind KOs the Gourgeist, and that's a good game. We move to game number 2, and we've got a perfect mirror lead, Seaking into Seaking. I'm very happy to catch Seaking on the lead, because even though I do run a very high rank Seaking, my Seaking does have a little bit of attack to it. My HP and defense are only 11 and 10, which means that my attack is a decent amount higher than most other top Seaking spreads. And that means in a lot of scenarios, I'm able to win charge stack priority. In this matchup, I typically just end up playing out the zeros, although I do think if you win charge stack priority, shielding the first drill run and just trying to keep your Seaking as healthy as possible is also a very valid play pattern. My opponent farms down with Amoonguss, and in case they're running a mirror team, I decide to bring in my own. If they're running a mirror team, I'm going to want my Tinkaton for theirs. But my opponent is running Sludge Bomb. Sludge Bomb does do quite a lot of damage. I wait the turn to ensure there's no catch, and then return fire with the foul play. Foul play is going to connect. I'm trying to reach for another foul play. My opponent tries for a catch, but that is not a Tinkaton, that is a Morgrem. And bad news for my opponent, as Morgrem is going to get completely shut down by the better fairy type, as in comes Tinkaton. Tinkaton is just an absolute nightmare for Morgrem. There's nothing that Morgrem can ever do. Morgrem goes for the foul play, Tinkaton laughs off the damage, and at this point, I'm just going to go straight Gigaton Hammer. Gigaton Hammer erases Morgrem from the field of play. Back in comes Amoonguss. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We get a great lead in the next match, Seaking into Shadow Victory Bell. Victory Bell will outpace in this matchup, and they love to throw immediately, so it ends up being a very safe catch onto Amoonguss. Not only does this save a ton of energy on Seaking for later, but if your opponent sends in a Seaking, your Amoonguss should actually survive the Leaf Blade, 7 Pecks, and an Icy Wind to guaranteed land a Grass Knot onto their Seaking. Now this is a debuffed Grass Knot, but it's still going to inflict some pretty significant damage. Seaking no shields, and they pay a very heavy price, as now all that's going to do is just set up farm for my Seaking. In this meta, Seaking energy is almost always valuable, and if it's not, then Peck will hit for super effective. And this is a rare scenario where the Seaking energy is not valuable, but the good news for me is that even though Golisopod walls off Seaking energy, Golisopod doesn't have great stats, so the super effective Pecks and the resisted Icy Winds are going to do enough that I should just be able to double shield and fully farm down. This sets up a guaranteed win condition for me, because now whenever my opponent switches in the Victory Bell, they're going to switch it into 2 loaded Icy Winds. They try and make a last second move on Golisopod, they're not going to get there, and in comes the Victory Bell. But there's just no way out as Victory Bell gets hit with the back-to-back Icy Winds. That's going to peel away both Protect Shields, and now that they're double debuffed and all shields are down, in comes Tinkaton. Opponent sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the match. Hopping into the next match, picking up a bit of a tricky lead, Seeking into Dartrix. The reason why this lead is a little bit awkward is Dartrix can grab an early shield advantage and then pivot out. So that way I'm always going to be down a shield for the remainder of the game. The good news for me is they end up safe switching into a Tentacruel, and Tentacruel really does not appreciate drill runs from Seeking. I'm almost at back-to-back drill runs. First one is shielded, but I'm able to outpace and make drill run number 2. Getting the shield parity back is very helpful. I'm going to overfarm and try and go for a payback catch. I farm up, switch into the Tinkaton, but my opponent is just simply too patient. And that is going to be rewarded, as now they get to land the Scald onto the Tinkaton. I farm up even more energy. There's the pivot out. They're able to save energy on that Tentacruel and now send in Jellicent. So they're running Dartrix double water. Jellicent is going to have to throw energy pretty quickly, because otherwise I would make it to Gigaton Hammer number 2. And even though Gigaton Hammer is resisted, it still inflicts some pretty massive damage onto Jellicent. I'm going to immediately send in Amoonguss, because Amoonguss is more than happy to absorb Shadow Ball and fully commit to the farm down. My opponent's switch clock should be coming up momentarily. Can we get the farm down? No, we cannot, as in comes Dartrix. I do have energy stored on the Seeking, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to get damage on the Dartrix before I pivot out. I'm able to make the back-to-back foul plays. This will not quite secure the KO, but it will put my opponent very low. They're going to no-shield. In comes the Seeking, but unfortunately, I am just not able to get the snipe. Dartrix hangs on very low HP, making the Seed Bomb, and if they send in the Tentacruel, I'm going to be firing off the Icy Wind. It is the Tentacruel coming in, and I fire off Icy Wind, winning charge attack priority. This Icy Wind is always going to be shielded. My opponent's win con in this moment is actually to undercharge their charge stack here and send in the Jellicent. They need Jellicent to farm down to win the game. In comes Jellicent, switch timer's up, we snipe down with Amoonguss, and that's going to be a win. In comes Tentacruel, Amoonguss gets the Astonish down. A very close game, but we escape with the win. We pick up a great lead in the next match, Seeking into Shadow Amoonguss. I do think that the regular Amoonguss is quite a bit better than the Shadow, just because the regular Amoonguss just has massive bulk. You're able to absorb charge stack after charge stack, and I don't really feel like the extra damage on the Shadow is particularly impactful. I'm very okay with playing out this matchup with the Seeking, even if I have to go down a shield for switch, as my opponent does end up baiting with the Scald. I feel pretty okay with that, because I'm going to be able to wall off Amoonguss with Tinkaton in the endgame. My opponent ends up double shielding drill runs. I will have to watch for a potential catch from my opponent, but so far, everything is going great for Seeking. My opponent full sends, they try and go for a catch, sending in the Amoonguss. I bank back-to-back drill runs and send in Tinkaton. At this point, this game is over. There is nothing my opponent can have in the back that will win them this game. I have back-to-back charge stacks loaded on Seeking, and my Tinkaton is just a complete wall to the energy from the Amoonguss. Normally, Gigaton Hammer would not one-shot here, but I got a bunch of peck damage on Seeking before pivoting out, and that puts them into range where they will actually get KO'd. In comes Tentacruel, very nice overfarm from my opponent, winning charge stack priority and taking the knockout with Scald. In comes Seeking, firing off the drill run. In the back is a Carbink, and this is a Pokemon I have not yet seen in this meta. Here, I really wish that I still had Tinkaton, because Tinkaton is one of the hardest answers to Carbink in the game. But after 2 drill runs land, I can send in Amoonguss, and this game is over. Carbink doesn't even throw energy, so I may as well fire off the Grass Knot and secure the KO. Grass Knot lands, that's the end of Carbink. In comes Tentacruel, but there's just nothing that Tentacruel could ever throw here, and my opponent knows it, so they will resign the match. We see a pretty familiar lead in the next match, leading Seeking into Klefki. Klefki will almost always no-shield the first drill run just because they know they can survive it. If the one-shield plays out, then enough pecks have landed where drill run would actually secure the KO. Drill run lands, that's big damage. I this time go for the catch and sneak onto Amoonguss. Normally I would go for the catch and sneak on a Tinkaton, but I wanted to switch it up, and I immediately regret that decision as in comes Tinkaton. Considering they were leading a Fairy Steel type, I was not expecting a second Fairy Steel type in the back, but here it is, Tinkaton to completely shut down Amoonguss' energy. If I want a chance in this game, I think I'm going to have to double shield the Amoonguss. This is going to be a very painful mid-game. However, if I end up shielding Gigaton Hammers, due to the fact that they use Fairy Wind as their fast move, they're not really generating any kind of meaningful damage here. So I end up double shielding, firing off the Grass Knot, and if I can Grass Knot into a farm down, that would be massive. My opponent does no shield, I get the farm down, I'm down 2 shields, but I have 3 very healthy Pokemon. My opponent's now going to send in Dartrix. Dartrix will immediately be hit with the foul play. Shield comes up from my opponent, and now I send in Tinkaton. I just have to watch for a catch attempt from my opponent. In comes Klefki. They do not get the catch. They do not get a foul play, and that's going to be game over, as now I just get to launch Gigaton Hammers. Gigaton Hammer will be shielded. Dartrix frantically trying to make it to a charge move, but this is a Tinkaton. I'm a Steel type. I'm a complete wall to their energy. They go for the Seed Bomb on the charge stack priority tie, but it's just too little, too late. Gigaton Hammer connects, Dartrix gets rocked, opponent sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the match. We've got a very tough opponent in the next match as I'm playing against Beelzeboy. It's a very bad lead as well, Seaking into Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl just neutrally destroys Seaking. However, every Grimmsnarl will fire off their energy as soon as they get it, so it's a pretty safe catch onto Tinkaton. Foul play, not going to do much. In comes Tentacruel, and this is not an amazing matchup for the Tinkaton. I'm not quite in a range where Scald will knock me out, but unless I get a bunch of Bulldoze debuffs, Bulldoze really does not do a lot of super effective damage here. The first Bulldoze does not get the debuff, Scald is going to connect, and Scald does get the debuff, and that just serves to make an already difficult matchup even more challenging. I fire off the Bulldoze, but this is debuffed, it's really not going to do much. Bulldoze gets the debuff, I try and go for a catch onto Amoonguss, but he's too patient. He's able to save energy and send in Shadow Mawile as his final Pokemon. Shadow Mawile will still take some pretty massive resisted damage from Grass Knot, and the moment that lands, I should be in a pretty safe spot to shield once and farm down. If he went for the Power-Up Punch bait, he would only get another Power-Up Punch, but since he Vice Gripped, I just fully farm down. Back in comes the Grimmsnarl. It was really tempting to go for the Foul Play bait, but it's double resisted, it's far too risky. I go for the Grass Knot gets the shield, I pivot into the Seaking, and Seaking has so much stored energy. I fire off the Icy Wind, shield comes up from the Grimmsnarl. This is gonna be close. I make it to another Icy Wind, and I will put up the Protect Shield. This means at long last, I'll finally get to take the knockout onto Grimmsnarl, but there's still a Tentacruel in the back. It's pretty low, but it has an incredible amount of energy. Down goes Grimmsnarl, back in comes the Tentacruel, there's the Scald, and this is going to be the end of Seaking. The game comes down to this. I'm one off a Bulldoze on the Tinkaton, and I still have quite a bit of HP remaining on my Amoonguss. In comes Amoonguss. Can I survive? Tentacruel fires off energy. This is going to be close. Scald connects. Amoonguss survives. 1 HP remaining, and that's going to seal the win. Amoonguss makes the foul play, knocking out the Tentacruel, and somehow we escape with the win. We've got a very familiar lead matchup in the next match, leading into a Seaking Mirror once again. The Seaking Mirror tends to play out a lot of different ways. If my opponent ends up shielding the first, then typically I assume they're going to go for the Icy Wind, so I will typically end up no shielding if they put up the first shield. I do like to try and play it out this way because shielded Icy Wind feels very bad, but if you're able to successfully call it Icy Wind, then suddenly the matchup feels quite a bit better. Drill Run is now debuffed, but it will still inflict some pretty nice damage onto the Seaking. My opponent overfarms massively, and I still don't know who wins Charge Attack Priority here. I decide that I don't really want to risk it, so I will end up just letting that go, and instead just send in Tinkaton. Tinkaton can go for an aggressive one-shield farm down, and Tinkaton's energy goes everywhere. My opponent's not going to let that happen. They save switch into Jellicent, and I have a very strong answer to Jellicent as in comes Amoonguss. Amoonguss has such a dominant matchup, and this matchup in particular is one of the big benefits of Grass Knot, because at this health range, a foul play will actually fail to secure the KO, but a Grass Knot will easily be enough to secure the knockout. My opponent ends up putting up the final shield, and at this point, I'm just going to let the Amoonguss go. I'm going to be trusting in Tinkaton to win this game. I farm up a ton of energy, there's a catch attempt, my opponent sends in their own Amoonguss, and this endgame is going to be very interesting. Gigaton Hammer inflicts massive damage. The good news for me is that Amoonguss really cannot do a lot of damage onto Tinkaton. So I'm very okay absorbing this energy as they fire off the Grass Knot, and just looking to try and overfarm as much as I can. So I farm up just shy of 100 energy, going for the Gigaton. Gigaton will be able to secure the knockout, and the good news for me is that his Seaking in the back is very, very low. In comes Jellicent, Jellicent able to make the surf, but with a shield to hide behind, Tinkaton will be able to win this game. I'm just going to keep farming, watching for a catch. There's the catch attempt, in comes Seaking just to get fully farmed down. We exit with the Gigaton Hammer loaded, and even though this is resisted, Jellicent's not surviving. Gigaton takes the knockout and gets the win. Hopping into the final match, Seaking into Shadow Victory Bell one final time. As always, I'm just going to be going for the catch here. Whether you go for the catch on 5 or whether you go for the catch on 6, getting this catch just puts you so far ahead in the match. My opponent now sends out Seaking, and this a little bit feels like deja vu, as Seaking plus Victory Bell is a pretty common duo, and this team handles that duo very nicely. Icy Wind lands, Amoonguss survives, and now I get to connect with this -1 Grass Knot. Grass Knot is shielded up, so my opponent really investing in their Seaking. I have a ton of energy stored on my Seaking, and I'm just going to try and peck them into a range where I can knock them out with a Drill Run. They full send the Drill Run, that works for me. Honestly, it would have been a lot worse if they went for an Icy Wind, because then my Drill Run would have failed to secure the KO. So I fire off the Drill Run, that's going to connect, and that sets up a peck farm down. I exit with an Icy Wind loaded, so my opponent can now never send in their Victory Bell. If they do, the game is basically just over. I fire off the Icy Wind, they put up the shield, and now I have a Tinkaton with a 2 shield advantage. And that is basically unbeatable in this meta. There's nothing that beats Tinkaton up 2 shields. Victreebel goes for the Leaf Blade, Tentacruel is in the back. This is a pretty negative matchup for the Tinkaton, but I have a 2-0 shield advantage. So even though it's a very negative matchup, Tinkaton should still be able to close out this game. Bulldoze number 1 did not get the debuff, Bulldoze number 2 does, and that should secure the game. I'm going to be shielding up the Scald, as Scald is going to be the move that does the most damage here. Scald does not get the debuff. I farm up to the Bulldoze, and this Bulldoze should be able to secure the KO. Bulldoze is going to not land because right there my opponent realizes there is no longer a win con, and they will concede the match. All in all, I had exceedingly positive results with this team. I went 14-6 with it in my first 20 battles, and I ended up recommending this team to several factions teammates. One of them started low 2600s and was able to climb up to 3048 or 3047, somewhere in the 3040s in only 7 sets. So an over 400 elo climb, and 2 other factions teammates were able to hit legend with this team tonight. So this team has proved to be a legend maker. I do recognize that publicizing the team might make the effectiveness of it a little bit worse, but I think that at this point it's pretty well established that Seaking plus Amoonguss is one of the cores to beat. Part of the reason why Seaking plus Amoonguss is just such an incredibly strong duo in this meta is the fact that Amoonguss behind a Seaking lead offers insane defensive resistances. So in a lot of matchups where Seaking would be taking super effective damage, you can set up Amoonguss to catch moves, like let's say a Seed Bomb from a Gourgeist or a Wild Charge from his Sweet Electrode. And when you add a Pokemon like the new Calm Day Tinkaton to that already incredibly strong duo, you end up with a very flexible, very strong ABC style team, where all of the Pokemon cover each other's weaknesses pretty well. Either Pokemon in the back can be used as a safe swap, and the entire team just has really nice defensive synergy across the board, where you can end up catching onto the Amoonguss or catching onto the Tinkaton and position yourself pretty well for success. But part of the reason why I like Tinkaton over something like a Klefki is because of the move Gigaton Hammer. Tinkaton now has absurdly strong matchups when shields are down or if it has a slight energy advantage, and Klefki doesn't really have those same matchups. So I'm a really big believer in Tinkaton over a Pokemon like Klefki. I don't think Klefki is bad by any means, but the faster pacing on Tinkaton, you don't have the fast move pressure, but Gigaton Hammer is just such an absurdly powerful move that I think it is worth putting on the team over something like Klefki. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel by leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated, so thank you guys so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.